IB Biology, Ecology, Conservation, Option C, Part 9, extends our study of population biology. This movie has its focus on the growth of fish stocks and sustainable fishing practices, as well as how we measure populations of animals in the field. This is a higher level topic only. The essential idea is dynamic biological processes impact population density and population growth. Here's the outline of the IB Bio Ecology Conservation Option C movies. Use this outline to find the part you need. This movie has its focus here. Here is the first IB syllabus statement of the movie. Analyze the effect of population size, age, and reproductive status on sustainable fishing practices. A stock of fish, let's say a marine species, has inputs, which would include births and the development of juveniles and immigration, and has outputs, which would include natural mortality, emigration, and harvest. Now, if the outputs, mortality, emigration, and harvest, don't exceed the inputs of birth and immigration, then the stock of fish can be maintained and harvested in a sustainable manner. Harvesting practices must be managed well so that the harvest never exceeds the input. Here's an example of sustainable fish harvesting. Over 1 year, the fish stock grows from 12 units of biomass to 26 units of biomass through new births and the development of juvenile fish. These are the inputs. 4 units die naturally. This is an output. And the surplus is 10 units, and that can be harvested sustainably. This is another output. 12 units remain in the stock where the annual process of growth and harvest continue in a sustainable manner. As long as fishing practices don't change or the environment doesn't change, the harvest of 10 units of fish can be sustainable. Now let's get into the detail of when, in the growth of a fish population, harvesting makes sense. Harvest fish during the exponential growth phase because the regrowth of the population is most rapid. Pay attention to this idea as I move to the next slide. This slide shows stock biomass on the y-axis across time on the x, and it has 4 fishing strategies: A, B, C, and D. Strategy A, harvest, regrowth, harvest, regrowth. The harvest occurs when the population is close to carrying capacity. The gentle slope of these regrowth curves represents the gentle slope here on the S-shaped growth curve. This is not a great strategy because the population regrows slowly. Strategy B is a harvest, regrowth, harvest, regrowth, harvest. You harvest when the population is growing exponentially, this part of the S-shaped curve. The regrowth following harvest is rapid, and it's over a relatively short period of time. Notice that there are 3 large harvests here over the same period of time when there are only 2 small harvests here with strategy A. Now strategy C, if one does not allow the population to regrow fully, you end up losing the population over time. The population decreases over time. This is not sustainable. And strategy D is one massive harvest. Once the population reaches its maximum size, one big harvest, and that's it. The population is finished, locally extinct. Now pay close attention to this graph because this graph displays sustainable yield on the y-axis over stock size on the x-axis. Harvesting when the stock is small, corresponding to this part of the S-shaped growth curve, results in very small yields because there are so few fish to catch. Harvesting when the stock is at maximum, corresponding to this point in the S-shaped growth curve, also yields very little because regrowth takes such a long time given the competition within the large population. But harvesting when the population is experiencing exponential growth, in other words, the biomass of the stock is midway between very little and maximum, brings the largest yield. This graph appears similar to the last one, but pay close attention. This displays sustainable yield over intensity of fishing. And it should make sense that if fishing intensity is very small, there is no yield. If fishing intensity is very, very high, yield would go down due to the loss of the fish stock. But at an intermediate level of fishing intensity, we produce the most yield, a sustainable yield. Here is a diagram that displays the inputs and outputs for a stock of fish. The important inputs for the mature stock is the reproduction of new fish, the development of juvenile fish into mature fish. Migration is also an input. The outputs are emigration, predation and mortality, and of course, harvest. The syllabus statement references fishing practices. Let's focus on what best fishing practices might be. If the mature stock is harvested at a rate equal to the rate of replacement in this development cycle, fishing is sustainable. If, however, females are removed selectively or if juveniles are harvested too early, then the sustainability of the fishing is at risk. Interestingly, in nature, the biggest, most mature fish are not those typically taken by predators. Predators usually take younger or weak fish. However, humans are doing something different. Technology, massive nets, and fossil fuel-powered ships have allowed us to exploit the biggest, most mature fish, as this diagram would imply. Our super predator behavior has disrupted the cycle and has changed the nature of ocean fish populations. The end result is an unsustainable fishing practice. Huge nets and fossil fuel-powered ships have provided the technology to harvest the world's largest fish, an unsustainable fishing practice. This graph displays the mean length of various fish species over a 30-year period. Humans are harvesting the largest fish, resulting in a general decline in the average length of fish. Selective breeding is occurring here, but it's not sustainable. Humans could be a more sustainable hunter if we were more selective about the fish we harvested, if we let the large fish go, and harvested varied sizes of fish. The median age at sexual maturity for Atlantic cod off the coast of Canada has declined between 1959 and 1979. Under the selection pressures of humans, fish populations have evolved an earlier age of sexual maturity. This graph displays total oceanic fish catch. Since 1950, world fish catch has climbed and reached 100 million tons, but has not risen higher over a number of years. 100 million tons is argued by some to be the maximum sustainable yield, while others argue that 100 million tons has exceeded sustainable yield. This graph displays total fish catch and the effort or energy required to catch the fish. The graph suggests that the energy required to catch the world's fishes has increased in recent years, even though total catch has not increased in those same years. In order to sustain a yield of 70 to 100 million tons, fleets are having to go farther and faster to find fish. This evidence suggests that ocean fish are not being harvested sustainably. This graph compares the tons of wild fish harvested in blue versus the aquaculture fish in green over time. The graph displays that wild capture fish has not exceeded 100 million tons in recent years, and to make up the difference for a growing population, aquaculture fish has come in to provide nearly 175 million tons of fish to the appetite of an ever larger world population. Fishing practices associated with sustainable fishing would be having restrictions on catching young fish, allow populations to regrow, monitor fish net mesh size. There should be quotas for species with low stock numbers, moratoria for endangered species, prohibit fishing during breeding seasons, create exclusion zones where no fishing is allowed. There can be a ban on particular methods such as drift nets that catch non-target species. And that brings us to the next IB syllabus statement: evaluate methods used to estimate the size of commercial stock of marine resources. How do we know the size of commercial stock of marine resources? Scientists can estimate the size of commercial fish stocks by gathering information from fishermen to determine the abundance from quantities caught. However, are the fish caught by small-scale fishermen accounted for in the statistics that estimate the total ocean catch? Are the unwanted fish, the bycatch, as they've come to be known, are they accounted for in statistics that estimate total catch? Scientists can estimate the size of commercial fish stocks by studying the catches to identify fish ages. Too few young indicates a lack of spawning, while too few old suggests overfishing. Scientists can estimate the size of commercial fish stocks by using echo sounders to monitor fish populations for density and location. Also by using coded wire tag detectors to mark and release fish in animal sampling studies, we can monitor fish populations. I will be covering animal sampling techniques later in this movie. Data from fish sold in markets can also be used to estimate total ocean catch, but this does not account for unwanted species that are thrown back dead. This graph shows total catch over the last 60 years, and the Food and Agriculture Organization has reported this line, but the Sea Around Us project suggests that the ocean catch is much higher. This is evidence that open ocean fishing is not operating in a sustainable manner. Measures that would promote the conservation of fish would be international cooperation and legislation for the large areas of ocean that are not under any specific government's control. We should be limiting total allowable catch. We should be regulating allowable gear, mesh sizes in particular, banning drift nets as well. We should be limiting the number of allowable fishing days for fishermen, registering and regulating the number of fishing vessels allowed to operate, close fishing during breeding seasons, cordon off certain waters for biological conservation, and encourage the use of fish farms for aquaculture. So in following the thread of working to know the size of populations, here are our next and last IB syllabus statements for this movie. Sampling techniques are used to estimate population size. Use the capture, mark, release, recapture method to estimate population size of an animal species. The capture, mark, release, recapture method, often known as the Lincoln-Peterson method, provides an estimate of the size of an animal population. Let's start our inquiry into the capture, mark, release, recapture method by looking at a problem. Maybe the mathematics will jump out at you. Capture 25 fish in a small pond, mark the fish by putting a notch in their fin, release them. 2 days later, after the marked fish have mixed thoroughly with the unmarked fish in the pond, another sample of 35 fish taken. 14 fish are marked. How many fish, approximately, are in the pond? Turn the movie off now and see if you can work through to the answer. Here is the Lincoln-Peterson equation. T is the total population. This is the unknown, what you'd like to get to know. M is the number of marked individuals from the first sample. N is the number of individuals in the second sample. And X is the number of marked individuals in the second sample. The equation can be written as a ratio, and I think this is the easiest way of visualizing the Lincoln-Peterson mathematics. Or the equation can be rearranged to be written as you see here. Most of the time you will see the equation as it is written here, but I like this form, and let me show you why. The left side of the proportion represents the first capture, the capture-release phase. M is the number of marked animals in the first sample, and T is the total population. This is what you want to know. The right side of the proportion represents the second capture, the second sample. We can simply plug in numbers. N, 35, was the total caught in the recapture, and X, 14, is the number marked in the recapture, and you can calculate T. I like the proportion mathematics because if you think about this side of the proportion, the number marked out of all the animals caught in the second sample, you can see that this right side represents a proportion that should be mirrored on the left side, animals marked out of total in the population. You can solve for T. Remember, 63 is an estimate, and the technique has numerous sources of error. Stay tuned. Maybe you can see the relationship here. The number marked in the first sample relative to the whole population is proportional to the number marked in the second sample relative to all the animals caught in the second sample. Number marked in the first capture mark phase over the entire population is equal to the number marked in the recapture phase out of all animals caught in the recapture phase. In this slide, we can see various live mammal traps used in field samples to estimate population size. But here's a question. 85 mice are trapped, marked, and released over a 2-day period. 1 week is allowed to pass to ensure mixing of the marked mice with all the other mice in the population. On day 10, 34 mice are trapped, of which 10 are marked. Approximately how many mice are in the population? Turn the movie off now or follow along with me. The answer you should have had was 289. Remember, this is an estimate and there are numerous sources of error. In my example of the fish, the scientist notched the fin of the fish as a way to mark the fish, and in this example, you could actually apply dabs of paint to the animal as a mechanism for marking. Now, this is where significant error could be introduced. In no way can the mark or the notch in the fin affect the chance of the animal's survival. Here is the specific method for the capture, mark, release, recapture method, also known as the Lincoln-Peterson method. An area is defined and marked off. Within this area, a selection of individuals are captured, counted, marked, and released. Markings may include a spot of paint or an ear tag, but cannot affect the survival of the animal. Sufficient time is then allowed to pass to enable released individuals to mix with the population. This is also very important and a source of error. A second capture is then made from the same area with both unmarked and marked animals counted. The Lincoln index is applied to estimate population size, and here is the equation. The Lincoln index assumes that all individuals have an equal chance of selection. Marked individuals will be randomly distributed after release, and that marking will not affect mortality. And that brings us to the end of IB Bio, Ecology, Conservation, Option C, Part 9.